I do now want to take a step back and talk about how the labor strike is really impacting everyone, employers versus employees. For the first time, I think, in modern history that I've seen, a few years ago, we saw the employees really have the power. We saw that with quiet quitting. Now it might seem that power dynamics changing with quiet cutting. First, explain what that is, and who really holds the power these days. Is it the employer or the employee?
Well, what we're seeing is a full-fledged battle for control of the workplace. I don't think there's a winner or prevailing party right now, but I do think it's notable that employees have more power than ever. I mean, we're coming out of several decades where employers have held all the cards, have held all the power, have imposed their will on employees, and now employees are fighting back. And so employers, you may see tools like quiet cutting, which is reassigning people to jobs that maybe they weren't hired for or not qualified for, and then slowly forcing them out of companies. You may see some of that, and we've seen that historically, and I've seen a number of instances of that this summer in my practice. But employees hold more power than ever, and these strikes are evidence of that. Employees are not afraid to quit jobs. They're not afraid to ask for more money. They're not afraid to raise complaints. They're not afraid to share information with each other. And there are so many ways they can do that, whether it's through a union, through Glassdoor, through simple Google spreadsheets that they pass around amongst each other. There's a real growing sense of employee activism that I think is here to stay, and that's very frustrating to some employers. You could even see it in some of the quotes that CEOs, very accomplished, polished CEOs, have given in the context of these strikes that are just complete misfires. Bob Iger is a prime example when, he said that the actors and the writers needed to be more reasonable. And, here's someone who's making tens of millions of dollars every year telling, people who are making a tiny fraction of that they need to be more reasonable in their demands. So employees are not afraid. And if you're an employer, you have to understand that. You have to be considerate in your communications. You have to be frequent in your communications. If you have a narrative about your company or about a particular job action that you want to, express, you need to do it. Because if you don't do it, employees will fill in that blank space with their own version of what's happening and why it's happening and who it's happening to. So there are definitely lessons for both sides here.
Let's talk about the lessons for the employers first. When Bob Iger released that statement, it sounded like he really had a tin ear. He wasn't listening to their demands. What do you think is the correct response instead, and how could someone like him course correct?
Well, a statement like that might have worked, 10 years ago, but right now with social media and with, the means of communication that employees have, employees can share their proposals with the world from the bargaining table within seconds, right? So there's going to be very little spinning possible when each side has that capability. It used to be that the employers controlled most of the information flow. They don't. Here, employees have equal access to information. So, what's the proper response in a strike situation or on a topic like wages? I think being reasonable, being fair, expressing a wish to reach a reasonable solution rather than name calling or accusations or branding one side right or wrong. I think reasonableness carries the day. What we are seeing right now in the workplace is that employees want to be heard, they want to be treated fairly, and they want to be treated respectfully. A comment like that from Mr. Iger is not really checking those boxes. But on a day-to-day basis, if you're a manager and an employer, you need to remember that. You need to be respectful, you need to be fair, you need to be open. Employers are really looking for a voice right now, and you need to provide them with that lane. If you don't, they're going to go somewhere else and find it.
What do you think was the catalyst here for this worker empowerment? Because I remember just generations back, maybe our parents, our grandparents, they stayed at a job for 40 years, put their head down, collected their paycheck. Now employees are much more outspoken. Why do you think that shift occurred?
It's a great question, and I think there's going to be a lot of studies done on this and a lot of research. I would say, and from my perspective, this is something that's been building for many years now. If you go back to the days of Jack Welch, where he took a company like NBC and said, or General Electric and NBC, and said, we're not going to be this company where people should expect long careers and benefits, and we're not going to refer to this place as a family. We're going to cut pensions. We're going to cut workers every year. Well, shareholders first, employees second. That attitude, which has built up over the last few decades, I think has really hit a wall with the pandemic, when employees said, hey, I put my life on the line to come to work. I spend every hour of the day helping keep this company afloat. What's in it for me? Where's your compassion? We've now come out of the crisis phase of the pandemic, and a lot of employers have been very deaf in their policies of return to work and other related issues, like demanding that employees come back for certain numbers of days of the week without consulting with employees first, or without any regard to issues that employees still may have in their lives, including mental health and other family effects from the pandemic. So those are some real things that are coming together that sort of have contributed to the rise in employee activism. And I think you just layer on the ability to share information. I mean, that is just so essential. It used to be that employers had all the salary data and it was a black box. Now employees have that too. And so they've really worked together to empower in a lot of ways that maybe they haven't realized the implications of. But here we are, and now there's a real fight going on for control of the workplace.